Alright guys, this is Ira Sutton. This video is just a short rant, kind of a rant, a tangent that I need to get out of my system. This involves an anime called Fairy Tail. So, for those of you, it will contain spoilers, so for those of you who have not seen Fairy Tail, don't look at this video, because it will contain spoilers. That being said, here I go. This has to do with a certain arc in the Fairy Tail anime involving the character of Lucy Heartfilia and her dad, Jude Heartfilia. Now, initially in the anime, Lucy ran away because her father was neglectful of her. It's understandable. I get it. Later on, her father hires a guild, Phantom Lord, to come after her. This inadvertently results in a guild war between Phantom Lord and the Fairy Tail Guild, which Lucy is a part of at this point. During this feud, the Fairy Tail Guild Hall becomes destroyed. But eventually, Fairy Tail wins the day, and Lucy is spared. Then, in episode 29, she gets a letter from her father. And then she goes back. And when she does, after putting on an elaborate dress, she meets with her father. And he tells her, that, she ran off without even saying a word to him, which she did. Keep that in mind. She did. She ran off without saying a word to him, which she acknowledges. She acknowledges that. But then he tells her that the main reason he brought her back was because he wanted her to be in an arranged marriage with another rich family, which would greatly benefit both of them. But then Lucy tells him, "No, I'm not doing that." She said, "I'm sorry I didn't leave without saying goodbye or anything, but I wanted to tell you how I feel before I say goodbye for good." And, she warned him, "Don't mess with Fairy Tail or we'll crush you. Father or not, you'll be treated like an enemy." And then she says goodbye to him. Then later in episode 51, her dad returns, and it's revealed that his company got bought out. No doubt by a slimy weasel that was undercutting him from underneath. He reveals that he lost everything: the home, the business, but luckily he was able to move his wife's grave to where she is, to where Lucy lives. I forgot the name of the town where the Fairy Tail Guild is. But then he says that he's going to start over in a town called, let me see if I can pronounce this right, Akalifa. Yeah, Akalifa. He's going to work at a merchant's guild over there. And then he says that in order for travel expenses, he needs like 10,000 jewel from her. But she doesn't have it. But he insists that that's not a lot of money. Of course, because, being rich the entire time, he doesn't really understand the differences in ordinary expenses, travel expenses, etc., etc. He believes that 10,000 jewel is just a small price to pay for travel expenses, when in reality it's way too much. And then so this kid starts then to get into an argument, and then Lucy, tells him, that money can't buy you happiness. He yells at her again. She tells him to go away. She runs off, claiming that he hasn't changed. Later on, Lucy finds out that a dangerous gang is near a Khalifa. And despite everything that happened between her and her father last night, she goes to try and save him. Even though she doesn't have the best opinion of him, he's still her father. She has to try to save him. So then she goes in, she beats the guild, and she saves them. She saves her, she seemingly saves her father, but she still can't find him until suddenly her father just shows up. He just got into town because, he didn't have enough money to travel, so he had to walk all the way. Hey, and Lucy is shocked, like, really? You wanted all that money for traveling expenses? That's what she's thinking to herself. I think she could have told him that. She could have told him that. Like, really, Dad? You wanted $10,000 for traveling? Seriously? You got to get out in the real world more, Dad. In any case, he's surprised that that his daughter came all the way because she was worried about him. But she's like, man, it don't matter. I may have been worried about you, but I still don't forgive you. And he understands. And then he tells him the story about, how the Merchant Guild reminds him of, it was where he first met Lucy's mom. They wanted to have a child, and on the building, the luck that says Love and Lucky, the K was missing, and it said Lucy, and they said they would name her that. If they had a daughter, they would name her Lucy. And Lucy's touched by this, and she playfully teases him about it, and then her father says he's proud of her, which she appreciates very greatly. And so they leave on better terms. But then much later on in the show, after a bit of a hiatus, they come back to Fairy Tale, and Lucy goes to visit her father, and she finds out that he had passed away. And she reminisces about, the tough times between her and her dad. And, she can't find herself to cry, and she wonders if she really hated him that much. But Natsu, the other main character of the show, tells her, listen, you don't have to cry to miss someone. You don't need tears for that. So, after a while, Lucy comes back to her house because in this episode she finds out that she didn't have enough money to pay the rent, so she got kicked out. But she gets let back in because before he died, her dad paid for her rent. Like 7 years worth of rent, because prior to this they had kind of gone into Lucy and a lot of other main characters had gone into a 7-year sleep. So she was let back in. Her father paid all that rent, and he also gave her 7 years worth of birthday presents. And for the 7th one, there was a letter. He was wishing her a happy birthday, saying, I don't know where you are, and I miss you terribly, but I know you're safe somewhere, and I know you'll come back. I hope you're doing the best you can and living your own path. And finally, at the end of the letter, he says, Lucy, I love you. That is one thing that will never change. And a tearful Lucy says, goodbye, Daddy. I love you too. And that's pretty much how the essential arc between Lucy and her dad ends. Let me see here. But there is one other thing. There is one other thing. Later on, like 10 or 20 episodes later, we're introduced to a girl named Michelle Lobster, who is actually Imitatia. Now, there's an arc with her involving an infinity clock that was presented to her by her dad, by Lucy's dad before he died. But what I want to talk about is what we find out about her later on. We find out that her real name is Imitatia, who is able to copy the appearances of anyone. And we later learn that she's actually a doll that was given to her by Lucy's parents, her mom and her dad. And at first, Lucy really loved her. She loved Imitatia. She loved the doll. But then after Lucy's mom passed away, she stopped playing with her. She became distant from her because she reminded her of her mom. Too many painful memories. And she had really kind of detested Lucy for that, sort of. Now, the reason I bring that up, is because it's an essential part of this, it's a key factor that I want to go back to a little later on. But before I do, let me state what really infuriates me about this arc. Let me explain point blank what really pisses me off about this arc. A lot of reactors that I have seen, with the exception of one, have really dug into Jude in episode 29, which is called My Resolve, about a lot of things, like about the way he acted in that flashback where Lucy was trying to give him a rice ball, but he yelled at her, saying that he didn't have enough time. It made her cry, and then the fact that he hired Phantom Lord to come after her, or even some trivial things like having her put on a dress before coming to meet with him. When she comes back, he makes her put on a fancy dress before coming to talk to him. Like, seriously, are you going to really dig into someone for having her put on a dress? A piece of clothing. A piece of clothing. Really? You're going to get on him for that. The other stuff, I can understand to an extent. Yes, I can understand to an extent. But digging into Jude for having her put on a dress. Hey, look, let me tell you something. If my dad had me put on a suit to talk to him, I would just take it with a grain of salt. Seriously. But these reactors want to get onto him for having her put on a dress to talk to her. A simple piece of clothing. Does it really matter what she wears? No, it doesn't. And, okay, so with that being said, now let's also talk about the scene with Lucy and her father in episode 29, where he talks about, let's take it step by step. First of all, with the comment that he said that, she left without saying anything, which, by the way, as I said before, is an absolute fact. She left without saying anything. Without saying anything. And I've heard reactors accuse him of gaslighting for saying this. But no, he's not gaslighting. If you bring up something that's true, that is not gaslighting. And Lucy did run away without saying anything. She did. But because they don't like the big bad dad, they have to say that he's gaslighting when he brings up a fact. Seriously. And now going on to her warning her dad not to mess with Fairy Tale or she'll crush him like any other enemy. I get that Lucy cares for her guild like a family. I understand that to the fullest extent, but still, I just did not care for that at all. I do not like negative family portrayals in any type of medium or in real life. She says, well, it didn't have to be this way. We could have sat down and talked with things, but I don't know, Lucy. Were you really willing to talk with him? You accused him of not really caring. You accused him of not really caring if you were there at all. Which everyone seems to think overall is the case. But it's not. It's not. Because as I explained before, he and her mom gave her that doll. And so no, him being an uncaring, scumbag, as I've heard reactors calling him, no, that's not true. That is not true at all. At all. No. It doesn't matter what you all say, he is not a complete scumbag. The thing that really drove that idea home for me was when she brought up, her mom, and we see the image of her, and then he's like, Layla, like, okay, yes, okay, obviously this guy cared a lot about his wife, Layla. And then, the final scene of that episode is him, one of the final scenes, not the final scene, but later on, before Lucy leaves, her father is looking out from the window at her with a kind of a sad look on his face, but he doesn't try to stop her. And that, to me, really said a lot about his character. But I could just tell that a lot of reactors were probably looking at that like, yeah, that's what you get, bitch. Really? But as I stated before, I know a lot of people were high and mighty on Lucy. Like, you go, girl. You tell that old bastard what's up. Not me. I just don't care for these kind of things. These negative family interpretations whether it's in fiction or in real life. No, I don't. Now, going back to the episode where her father comes back, episode 51, called Lucky and Love, or is it Love and Lucky? Oh, whichever. He comes back, and the thing about it is that, and again, I'm taking this step by step, going by what reactors say and whatnot. When he mentions that he lost everything, and specifically the part when he says, it's funny really, I pushed my family aside for that fortune after everything I did, and now it's gone. I could almost laugh. A lot of reactors I've seen have said well, that's karma. That's what you get. Really? Seriously? No. If anything, he probably got his company was probably stolen from under him by some, like I said before, some slimy businessman that tricked him. But yet everybody wants to, again, dig into him, give him shit, and say that him losing his fortune, that yes, he did kind of push aside his family for, is karma. Well, in a way it is, but at the same time, but you are really going to condone the fact that he probably got that stolen from him by some shady, slimy character? Seriously? No. And of course, and the biggest thing is when he asks her for money. That's when people start to dig into him again, calling him a scumbag because, he's asking for money. That whole thing was a misunderstanding, people. He asked for $10,000 for travel expenses. Even Lucy points it out. Really? He thought he wanted to ask for that much money for traveling expenses. He didn't know. I mean, they probably would have reacted the same way if he had asked for much less than that. And that would have been stupid. Asking for a little money to travel. Yeah, they would have dug into him for that too. Let me see. And then going back to, the final scene with Lucy and her dad, talking about, how she hasn't forgiven him. Well, let me see. Going on to that scene, well, the only thing I can really say is that, well, let me see. Well, in terms of that, I get that she's angry at him. But at the very least, he acknowledged that he was wrong for yelling at her. I just find it kind of fickle that at that point a lot of reactors are on his side now because they're the same people that were digging into him for things about him that weren't true, about him being a scumbag and a lousy father, which overall was not true. There is a difference between doing bad things and being a bad person. And a bad person is not what Jude was at all. No, he was not. And then, of course, there's the scene, of course, later on in episode 124, where he passed away and gave Lucy those presents and talked about how he loved her. That was a beautiful scene. I really sincerely wish that it didn't have to go through that we didn't have to go through all that bull crap to get to this. I would have been better if this whole thing didn't exist at all. I mean, if it were me, personally, I would have made it so that maybe Lucy ran away because her father was giving her too much attention. Maybe she just needed some space. Or what if she was the one that lashed out due to her mother's death? Which technically she already did. What if that was the reason she left? Like, what if she left because she needed to find some solace after the death of her mother, and then that's where fairy tale comes in? They help her. Her experiences in fairy tale help heal her through the pain of her mother's death. That could have been a good story to tell. And now let me really get to the heat of this thing by talking about Imitatia and her relationship with Lucy. You know, for all the shit that all these reactors and a lot give Jude for the way he acted towards her in episode 29 in that flashback and hiring that guild and lashing out at her, the truth of the matter is, Lucy was no better than him at all. Because she did the exact same thing to her. Lucy did the exact same thing to Imitatia. When Lucy's mother died, Lucy abandoned her and lashed out at her and left her in the attic to collect dust. And before any of you say, oh, well, Imitatia didn't hire a guild to come after her, well, maybe that's true, but nonetheless, she still lashed out at her and neglected her. No different than her father. So don't even try to pull that BS on me, because it ain't gonna work. And if you do, I'm gonna bring it up. If any of you even says, if any of you who watch this video even says, if you even say, well, Michelle didn't hire a guild to come after her, I'm going to come after you and use this as a point. I'm going to use her as this. I'm going to say it, that Lucy was no different than her. So go ahead and try. I mean it. Go ahead and try. So yeah. That was, with that being said, it really just disgusts me and infuriates me when I think about this. Because everybody and their mothers wants to condemn Jude for what he did to Lucy. But, and in particular, the part about him being a neglectful father. When Lucy didn't turn out to be any different when it came to Imitatia. So the next time any of you look back at episodes 51 or 29 of Fairy Tale and you dig into Jude and be all, yay, Lucy, you tell him what's up. You just think about the fact that, yes, Lucy was in fact no different than her father. Because quite frankly, if you don't, that makes you absent-minded. Very absent-minded. So yeah, that was just me going off on this tangent rant. I had to get this out of my system before I exploded with more anger. But yeah, thank you all for listening. Ira Sutton, over and out.